Welcome back to It's Interesting, the world of travel. Please welcome to the show, Doreen Finnegan. Doreen.
Hi, Jordy. So good to be on here.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining me on today's episode of It's Interesting, the world of travel. Let's get on to it, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, well, my first question for you is, can you please tell me about the history of the city of Antwerp?
Yeah, I'd love to. Antwerp actually has a very interesting history and a lot of fun facts.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll start right at the beginning. So, Antwerp began as a very small settlement in the early Middle Ages around the 7th and 10th century. And it's located right on the river Schelde, which I know is a very Dutch word. But because of its ideal location between the North Sea and then inland Europe, it actually quite quickly established itself as an important place for trade and merchant activities. And so then
Mm-hmm.
by the time the 13th and the 14th century, it really established itself as a main place for trading textiles, spices, metals was really big. There's still remains of, those places of trades in the city, which is really cool. And then by the time the 16th century rolled around, that's where Antwerp had what they called the Golden Age. It had established itself as the most important, as one of the most important cities in Europe because of the city being the commercial leader. In fact, 40% of the world trade passed through the Antwerp port. So as you can imagine, very important back in that time, but it still is today. Antwerp now in modern times is Europe's second largest port. But in addition to that, it's also, and I'm sure this is interesting
Mm-hmm.
to many of the lady listeners, but it's
Mm-hmm.
the important trading center for diamonds. On top of it, also being one of the important fashion capitals. Some of you might know of Dries Van Noten, who was recently a designer for Dior and has done some other big houses. Well, he's one of Antwerp's very own, and we're very proud of that. And of course, there's so many other big names in the fashion industry that come from my hometown. I'll add one fun anecdote. So the name Antwerp comes from the word handwerpen, which in Dutch means throwing the hand. So it goes back to this old legend that there was an ogre kind of type figure back in the Middle Ages who would have been protecting the port and would hold his arm out and would only let through people that would bring good goods. And then there was a pirate type ship that came in and cut off the hand, and they threw it in the river, the Schelde, which of course is a legend, but that's how or where the name Antwerp originally came from. So, fun fact.
Yeah, no, so the history, that's quite interesting. It reminds me
Mhm.
of when my sister, she was like kind of telling me the history of, I believe it was Lille and Gaunt.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like something similar, like
Yes.
not the whole like the port part, but like
Yep.
getting colonized by other countries. Well,
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, no,
A
that
lot
sounds,
of old history there.
yeah, no, does it still look, well, I guess when you were, well, when you were growing up there,
Yeah.
did it still look medieval or was it a little bit modern compared to now?
It's really cool. I think it has that perfect blend of both. A lot of the old buildings were protected throughout the different wars. In fact, Antwerp was one of the first cities to have a stock exchange, and that actual building still exists to this day. And many of the old trading buildings and the hangars from back in the day, they all still are there. But then As the city grows, you see these very modern and pretty cool design structures go up in the city. So it's an old city with a modern flair.
Yeah, no, that sounds really great. Thank you very much for answering my question. My other question is, please tell me about the main attractions of Antwerp.
Yeah. Where to begin? I would say when you have a day to go to Antwerp, you must see the historical center. Again, just kind of taking it all in, seeing all these beautiful old medieval buildings. There's two marketplaces, the big one and the small one. And that's where the trade used to occur. That's also where you have the city hall. And what's pretty neat is particularly in summer, there's many terraces that are kind of set around. So just sitting there, sipping on a good Belgian beer, is kind of a perfect way to take in the city. We're also known for our cathedral, which is just this, really important part of the landscape of Antwerp. And it's as beautiful inside as it is on the outside. I think just because of how unique the Diamonds district of Antwerp is, just taking a stroll through there is really fascinating as well. And just seeing how, you got all the diamonds sort of um, displayed there right for you to pick it out. And then if you were gonna see some of the newer areas of town, there is a little harbor, like an inner city harbor, where they have some newer museums that kind of go about the stories of the old port stories, but also the immigration. Red Star Line. Antwerp was a big sort of stop for the Red Star Line back in the days. So there's some really neat museums out there. And truly, in any of these places, you'll find really nice terraces for you to just sit down, have a good drink, take in the city. And otherwise, make sure you go shopping because it truly is a hidden gem for fashion. And in my opinion, the best shopping in the world.
Right, so it sounds like it's pretty, there's a lot of attractions that people
Yes.
they need to go see.
Yeah, it's most people make it a day trip, but it's one of those things where you could easily go for 2 to 3 days
Hmm.
to truly take it in. Lots of great restaurants as well.
Hmm.
We have a good food culture in Belgium, and there's definitely no shortage of good restaurants in Antwerp, all the way from street food style to very refined options with Michelin star restaurants and everything else in between.
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, it's a very lively city, lots of students as well. Um, yeah, it's truly a little gem.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Thank you for answering my question. The next question you semi-answered. This one, what restaurant place or coffee place in the city of Antwerp had made you feel like you were a local? Like, even though you
Yeah.
are from the place, what was like a
Yeah.
place that a lot of locals went to?
Yeah. I think it's hard to pick one because there's just too many, but I will,
Hmm.
um, one of the things that I would recommend tourists to do to feel like a local. Every Sunday, there is a market right next to the Antwerp Theater.
Hmm.
And it truly is for locals. They sell about anything at this market, from birds to fish, live fish, that is, to flowers, to food, to anything, spices, anything you can think of. And so a lot of people will go there on Sunday for lunchtime. They'll pick up their fresh flowers that they'll, bring home, and they'll pick up some food from the local food stands. A very popular snack would be the shrimp croquette.
I've heard about that.
We've got, yeah, well, we have these tiny, tiny little shrimp that come from the North Sea. And so this is a very true an authentic Belgian thing is the shrimp croquette. So you would have that along with a little glass of champagne, because yes, we drink champagne like it is water, and that would be your Sunday local experience.
Yeah, no, that sounds like that's That sounds like something my mom would do.
Yes.
Mhm. Actually, I'll actually tell her that I said that. All right, that's really great, and thank you for answering my question. And then, what place when you what is one place that you miss about the what's one place that you miss about the Antwerp?
Yeah. Um, my fondest memories of probably obviously more of my adult life in living in Antwerp. Um, in the summer, we have this pop-up beach bar situation right by the river. And everyone just comes and hangs out. We're sitting on the edge, of the arcade that, sort of gives onto the river. We'll pick up a drink or, would bring a picnic. And you just socialize there, sitting there with your friends, watching the sun go down. And there'd be like a DJ playing in the background, and it's just the most chill vibes. Urban beach situation.
Mm.
It's just such, it's such a neat experience because it truly is a place of connection. And to this day, throughout seasons, even in winter, on a nice day, people will just go to that, to the river. They'll bring their picnic blanket and just sit by the river and have some good food and good drinks and catch up with friends. So that's a place that will always bring some special memories for me.
Yeah, that seems pretty fair. Now, as a kid, what was a place as a kid you
Yeah.
missed?
Yeah, I remember as a kid when we would I lived in the suburbs of Antwerp, and maybe once a month we would go into the city. And I always remember as a little kid, the whole experience of going on a train itself is cool, but then you arrive in Antwerp Central Station, which is a UNESCO classified building, is just so stunning. But I can vividly remember, the small girl in such a grand building, and just so many levels of trains arriving all in one place. That's definitely something that I'll always remember. And anyone visiting Antwerp is very likely to come in through the central station. And I would highly recommend they just, look around, look at all this beautiful architecture, because there's not many stations that are this old and so well preserved. And just, yeah, true, beautiful architecture.
You know, that sounds really wonderful. Thank you for
Mhm.
joining me on today's episode of It's Interesting the World of Travel.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, once again, thank you for joining me. Okay,
Amazing.
goodbye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back to It's Interesting the World of Money. Please welcome back to the show, Ricardo Estrada. Ricardo,
Jordy, good morning. How are you?
good morning as well. What's 8 a.m. for you and 9 a.m. for me over here? So,
It is. It's always raining in Vancouver in the winter.
oh boy. Well, I feel like that's a lot better than having actual winter compared to the likes of here of Calgary.
No,
No?
I enjoy a lot more. Yeah, yeah. The snow doesn't get you wet. You can cover snow, but when rain is just brutal here, and it's dark, and yeah, anyway. But not a lot of people can handle the cold, so I guess you can make your choice.
All right. I mean, okay. Ready to hop into these questions?
Yes,
Okay. My first question is, please tell me about what exactly do you mean by financially disciplined?
I think if I were to put it in like a few words, it's just like always I've said, spend less money than what you earn.
Mm-hmm.
Save the rest and invest the rest. Just, it should be very simple to everybody to understand. Don't go into debt. Don't have a deficit. If you're disciplined, you can do it. I don't think anyone, at least in Canada, in this country, uh, especially if you're a couple living together and both working, should or have to go into debt other than a mortgage. So financial discipline is just basically spend less than what you earn. It should be very, very straightforward.
Like you said, just spend less and save your money. It's not that hard.
And invest it. Yes.
And invest
Not
it
hard.
into some, yeah. All right, thank you very
Don't
much.
put it under the mattress. Under the mattress, you're just losing to inflation. You're losing purchasing power.
Okay, thank you very much for answering that question. My other question is, what is your credit history? Not your credit history, but what is credit history?
Well, credit history, it's publicly available to mostly financial corporations, and they do have, which then I guess we'll talk about credit score, but it just tells you if you've actually taken loans, if you pay them on time, if you got a credit card, if you pay that credit card on time, if you only pay the minimum balance and then let it balloon, which credit cards love, because that's basically their business. I mean, if you think about how you owe, I don't know, $10,000, $12,000, $15,000, and the minimum payment is $10. That is just encouraging you to pay that minimum payment and continue with the huge amount of debt in the credit card, which, by the way, is one of the most expensive credits that there are. They're upwards of 20%, other than the payday money market or something like that loan. It's one of the most expensive ones that they have. So your credit history is something available, publicly available, to anyone that I guess will exactly tell you. Now, it's good to have a good credit history, but in this case, it's not better to not have a credit history because you
Why is
don't
that?
create a record. See, if you have never had a credit card or have never had a loan, even if you pay it, it's better to have a credit card and pay it on time every time. I have the privilege, and I boast about that. I've never in my life paid a single interest on credit cards, but you create credit history. So it's as bad as having a bad credit history as not having a credit history at all, especially I guess for younger people. If you don't have a credit history, it's just as bad as having a bad credit history. So financial institutions, when assessing whether to give you a loan, even like a car loan or like a furniture stores, you go to the brick and they actually check your credit record, you check your credit history. If you have nothing, it's really hard for them to lend it to you. Either you have no credit history or if you have bad credit history. So although I encourage everyone not to ever have loans or I guess it's just outstanding debts. It's good to have a credit card to create your credit history as long as you pay it in full before the due date. So the credit history, again, is just basically a record of your past loans, mostly all of them, and then financial institutions for credit card companies or car loan companies or furniture companies, everything that can buy credit can actually access your credit history, look at it, and see if you are credit worthy, if you have paid on time in the past. Because that, in their minds, and I guess it's right, maybe creates a pattern that you have been paying your debts on time. Therefore, they can give you another loan because they expect that you can actually repay it. It will actually make your credit a little bit cheaper too.
Okay, so like you said, it's something that publicly that sees your history of what you've got, what the bank has given you, and what
The
you
bank, a credit card, a car loan, a furniture store, anything that you can buy with credit. Yes.
and then what you have done to pay them back exactly.
Right. It actually creates, if you filed for bankruptcy, and that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
It really affects your credit history. Say, how am I going to give you money today for whatever reason if you file for bankruptcy in the past? And be like, well, maybe you're not good at handling debt.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you very much for answering my question. And then my other question is, What kind of activities affect your credit history?
Well, it's there's a couple of things. It's the amount of loans that you take. If somehow your credit history shows that you've got 10 credit cards, maybe not that good. Good to have two, maybe three, maybe four. How often do you pay on time? What's your average balance? If you have a huge balance all the time, you're stressed out. If you have a car loan, a mortgage, 3 credit cards, you have furniture store, like you said, you buy your couch on credit. You've got, you have everything on credit. I'm thinking your credit history is not affected. If you nowadays, it blows my mind when you go to Amazon and you want to buy for whatever it is for $20. Hey, pay 4 installments of 5. You can go now to DoorDash or Skip the Dishes and finance that.
Mhm.
See, that's how far we've gone into this debt culture that we have. So, it basically, how many loans do you have? What's the outstanding balance? How often do you actually use them? How often do you pay them on time? And it all creates a score, right? And that
Mhm.
score goes with you, and it can go up or down. Even checking, if you have someone checking your credit score, it can affect your credit score a little bit.
Yeah, no, so so previously, similar to the last answer that you said, it has to do with like loans and credit cards and like checking credit scores.
Right. Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's similar.
Thank you very much for that answer. And then my other question is, what things are convenient to increase or maintain your credit rate?
Uh, it's it's different from someone my age as from someone young as you.
Mhm. Yes.
You have to first create a credit score. To create a credit score, I guess the easiest way to do is just to get a credit card.
Yeah.
Get a credit card and don't go overboard with a credit card. You get a
Yes.
credit card, they'll probably give you a small balance. See, as an immigrant myself, I remember when I first got a credit card here, the only way, because I had no credit history, they gave me a credit card for, I think, a $1,000 credit. But in order to get the credit, I had to deposit with the bank, and this was HSBC 21 years ago,
Mhm.
$2,000 in a GIC. So if for some reason I defaulted on that, they would just take the money out of my GIC, which is, of course, money that I invested in the bank, a guaranteed investment certificate. So since I had no credit history, I had to put money in the bank as maybe as collateral, as a guarantee for a credit card, which, as you know, the credit cards are expensive because there's unsecured debt, right?
Yes.
The credit card company or the bank, the credit card company just issues the credit card, but it's the bank that actually lends you the money. But the money is basically unsecured. If you don't pay, of course, it affects your credit card, but the credit card company can't really go against your assets unless it's huge. Or it's just called unsecured debt. So in order to get your first credit card, you might have to, nowadays they give it to anyone. You're breathing, here's your credit card, right? So you get a credit card and then you use your credit card and you pay your credit card, and that starts building your credit score. Eventually you are older and then you buy a house, you get a mortgage, that also increases. But it affects your credit card because of the capacity of the availability of credit that you have. But if you pay that on time, it improves your credit score. So it's counterintuitive that in order to improve your credit and to get a credit score and increase it, you actually have to get into debt. But again, always pay your debts when they're due and your credit cards in full before they're due.
So like you said, just pay your credit cards, your debts on time, and you'll be fine.
Yes, yes. And of course, if you can't, then you should have not gone into debt.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for joining me on today's episode of It's Interesting, the World of Money.
Jordan, my pleasure as always. Hopefully we can talk again next week.
I hope so as well. Once again,
All right.
Thank you for joining me on It's Interesting, the World of Money.
Have a good day, Jordan.
Thank you, you too. Goodbye. Welcome back to It's Interesting, the World of Statistics. Please welcome back to the show, Alberto Nettel. Alberto?
Hello, Jordi. How are you?
I am doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. A little jet lagged after having been in Canada and just coming back to down under. But all in all, trying to make sense of life still as we all do. So here I am.
I mean, your Canadian trip sounded fun, no?
Oh, it was, it's I was still working, but the evenings and weekends got to see family, nieces, nephews, people I love. So it all worked out well.
Yeah, that sounds really wonderful. Are you ready to hop into these questions?
Let's do it.
All right. The first question is, why do you think statistics are important in fields like sports, business, or health?
Okay, well, to start with, you said three fields, but I can tell you statistics is important in every field. Now, why is it important? Let's say sports. Sports, it's more important than what we actually see on TV, right? On TV, people usually just talk about descriptive statistics, meaning things they have seen. So we have seen so far that out of 30 games where the Patriots started winning, they win 30%. Okay, perfect. That's just a fact. That's kind of what happened with the sample they have. But it's important that there's more things that you can do. You can do inferential statistics. You can look at average speed and things that can actually help people plan their games, right? You could actually try and see of the distribution of where the passes go, etc. So if you're a defense, you can say, well, we know that usually this person likes to send things here, so it can help you in sports at the game. But also regarding injury prevention, etc. We've seen that if people do this kind of movement, etc. So that's kind of in sports. In health, well, clinical trials. When you have a new medicine, a new drug, it is always very, very important to test it, right? And okay, there's testing sometimes in animals, etc. But you need to know what happens in humans. So the whole idea of inferential statistics that you try a small sample to try to think of, can we project these results to the overall population, right? There's still the issue that people sometimes take it as if it was an oracle. And in my sample, I saw this. But if you use all the inferential part, you can get a good guess of where things may be going. And this helps people develop new drugs, new treatments, etc. So you said sports, health, and what was the other one?
Business.
Business. Well, business statistics, people nowadays, it's the hot topic, analytics, right? They call it analytics, business analytics, which actually also statistics is more than just prediction. Sometimes it's trying to find patterns, right? And when you're doing marketing, it is really important to see patterns of purchasing, patterns of products that go together. So if you're going to Amazon, Netflix, all these recommender systems that tell you, people who bought this whole thing, or hey, Jordi, you may be interested in buying this because you're buying one thing, is because they have seen a pattern that within a certain age, a certain purchaser, a certain customer, etc., there are these behaviors, right? So these are all the ways in which, these are some of the ways in which statistics can help all of these fields.
Yeah, so from what I'm hearing, the three fields that I said, or that I asked, of sports, business, and health, they like to diversify the statistics.
Well, it is. There are diverse statistics that they can use for whether they want to sometimes you want to concentrate the business, sometimes you want to diversify the business or the treatments, right? So, but it is an array of different statistics that can be actually used.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Thank you very much for answering that question. On to my other question is, why do you think that the median can sometimes be more useful than the average?
Well, this is a great question. A lot of people are used to the average just in general because, people use it even without knowing, in a way, right?
Yes.
You get your quiz back in class, you look at your answer, And some of the first questions are like, what was the average of the class, right? Because if you got a mark of 60, but the average was 50, you feel like, hey, I ruined the world. If you got a 60 and the average was 80, you're like, well, maybe I'll shut up and not say anything, right? It gives you an idea of where things tend to clump around, right? So
Yes.
both the mean and the median are what people call, well, what statisticians call measures of central tendency. So the name sounds like, ooh, but when you split it all, it's about center. But the tendency part is telling you it's not the center as we know the center of a circle, right? The perfect spot in the total middle. It's more of the tendency of things to clump up. So the mean is really good when your distribution, when the data, when the things you have are very symmetrically distributed, right? So then it is a good idea of knowing where things are. You can think of the mean as saying, let's look at all the money people have, and then if we were to split it equally amongst all of us, what would we get, right? So that would be the average. Now, the median, the good thing about the median is that it's telling you another thing of where things seem to clump up. So the median is the value of whatever you're looking at. It could be, number of touchdowns. It could be dollars, the income, right? At which 50% of your sample or your population has less than that, and 50% has the other, right? So that splits, it's the value at which your distribution splits in half. So when you have things that are not fully symmetric, the median is way better. And this is the income. We all know more or less what we earn, and we not all earn what Bill Gates earns or what Elon Musk, right? Those two values, if we did the average, are pulling the average up, right? Because if we put their billions and divide it amongst all of us, we get way more. The median is actually not affected by those two outliers because, well, they're still the top 0.001%, and the value that tells you how many people are below is still the median. So most of if you think of the median house price, is 50% of the houses are at least this price, and 50% of the houses are more than this price. So the median is really useful when things are not really symmetric, when you can have outliers.
Yeah, no, so that sounds really interesting. Half of the time my brain was thinking, what are these words?
But that's the part where you need to be thinking, the stats, the words in stats are very much what they mean in pure English, right?
Yeah.
So the mean is really the average. The median, right? It's like really think of mediating, right? So splitting things in half.
Also, like saying, hey, you got this half and you got this other half.
Exactly, right? So at which value would we have things below, have things above? That's the median. That's the simplest way to look at it.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering my question. My other question is, why do you think averages can sometimes be misleading when people talk about numbers or data?
Well, this builds a little bit on what I was just telling you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Given that the mean is really trying to think of a seesaw, right? Like
Yes.
or a teeter totter. That's what. If you were to put little rocks, right, in one side, well, it will just come down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have more rocks on that side, the mean will move the hinge of the seesaw to balance things, right? So maybe the mean will be here or here, depending on how many rocks you have. So it could be misleading in the fact that, again, taking my example of income, if we said the mean to talk about how well Calgary is doing, we could talk about the mean income. So that means, again, there's going to be those CEOs that earn millions of dollars. And then on average, although most of us earn less than $150,000, when you put these people that earn millions, the mean will come to be like 200, 250. And so I can present that as saying, in Calgary, the mean income is 250,000, right? And people are like, wow. But well, that doesn't mean that a lot of people would get that. That's just on average, we get those that earn millions and millions. That's what we get. So that could be misleading, right? Because then really the population, most of the population, maybe 90% of the population, doesn't earn more than 200, right? So those are the things where we need to be careful about the mean, and people use this in many ways too, right? Again, if your distribution of what you're talking about, when you plug things, when you put little pebbles per each person that has a certain value, doesn't look like a symmetric thing, the mean will be misleading. I'm telling you where most things are centered around, right? So that's one of the potential problems with using the average.
Yeah, it sounds very misleading. I mean, I think there have been times where statistics, they kind of like instead of saying the average, they've said like what the median of like house prices in Calgary or like any cities in Canada before.
Yeah, and that's the best way to talk about it is to say, well, median. So if I tell you the median is house price is 400,000, you know that at least 50% of the houses being sold are 400 or less, and the other 50% of the houses being sold are 400 or more. If I just tell you the average, right? Again, we have the big mansions that can push things over, and then you think you'll never be able to buy a house, right? So it is how people present them. Stats themselves are not the lies or the misleading. It's how people use them that can mislead people.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Thank you very much for answering my question. And then, how do you think statistics show up in everyday life without people really noticing?
Oh well, Jody. I mean, that's one of the things I always use as part of my exams when I'm teaching. There's this thing in which people love and hate. Love to use, but hate because they don't necessarily understand it. The whole idea of hypothesis testing, and in journals they talk about p-values and all these things. And these are the things that are again trying to say what I see in my sample. Can I have some idea that it may or may not relate to my population? And people think like, what? But like that's so abstract, etc. And I always tell people, well, you do hypothesis testing in a way without doing the full structure every day. Let's say you and I go to a pub or a bar, and then you see someone that you think you like, and you say, hey. I look at the person, I look at myself, and I think I have a chance. That's an assumption, right? You're assuming that maybe because of the way the person looks and the way you look, you'll have a chance to ask them for whatever, their phone number, etc. You actually go, finally try, and then you succeed or you don't, right?
Yes.
And so once you have the data, you realize, oops, it's not really what I assumed. Therefore, what I assumed was wrong. And that's kind of what we do in hypothesis testing in statistics, right? You think, well, I believe this drug will work better than the other one. You do the full trial, you get the data, and if the results you see do not jive, do not align with your assumption, you end up saying, I don't believe my assumption. So we go through this a lot of the time, every day, right? Again, think of that, getting your quiz back and trying to see if you're doing better or worse, or if it's really a bad prof, or it was you that had a bad mark, right? Again, if the average was 90 and you got 60, maybe it's you. If the average was 40, you say, see, on average, like we are believing people are centered around 40%, like people are doing, so maybe it's the prof, right? So you keep using them without necessarily thinking, oh, this is blah, right? If you're going on a trip, most of the time you'll say, well, I think it's more expensive. Food is really expensive in, let's say, Japan, but not so much in Vietnam. Without knowing it, you're thinking in general, on average, right? It's not every meal. You don't have in your mind each dish compared. You say, well, overall, if I do the average, I think you can spend less here. So these are things that we're doing without necessarily thinking I'm doing statistics, but you are.
Yeah, it really sounds like I've been doing, or everyone has been doing statistics almost their entire life.
That's true, right? Without formalization, right?
Yeah.
But in a way, we are doing where we're doing hypotheses, we're looking at trends, we're looking at patterns, right? Statistics formalizes all of these and helps you get a better sense so that, it can be more generalizable.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much for joining me on today's episode of It's Interesting, the World of Statistics.
Thank you, Jody, for having me. It's, I hope your audience is still liking this. This part. Obviously, your podcast who's not gonna like it, please. And thanks for having me again.
Thank you. No, once again, thank you very much for joining me on today's episode of It's Interesting, the World of Statistics. Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Welcome back to another episode of It's Interesting, the World of Sports. And today I'm going to talk about the NHL trade deadline. So let's get straight into it. At first, there weren't really any major deals. We had some minor deals, but we did have Nick Foligno joining his brother to Minnesota. Later on, we didn't really have any more deals, but in the middle, we were getting calls that Braden Shen was getting traded over to the New York Islanders for 2 picks, a first rounder for next year and a second rounder for 2027. But near the end, or as soon as the buzzer hit, we had the likes of Nazem Kadri getting traded to the Calgary Flames in exchange for Victor Olofsson, a first-round pick for 2028, a prospect, and another pick, which it was already crazy enough because earlier, the Flames, they traded for Ryan Strome for a 7th-round pick. Now, a lot of Flames fans, including myself, we didn't fully understand why Conroy decided to go get Strome for a 7th-round pick, but then as soon as he said that, as soon as he traded Nazem Kadri away to Colorado, it made more sense to us then. Although, interestingly enough, there was supposed to be another trade happening where we would send Nazem Kadri to the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for Arbor Xhekaj, Owen Beck, Patrick Laine, and a first-round pick for 2027. But then what ended up happening was that Patrick Laine, he didn't waive his no movement clause. So then that happened. So then after that, the trade deadline, that was over. And there were a lot of pieces that I think that could have been moved. Someone like Robert Thomas, who, mind you, the St. Louis Blues, they aren't doing good this season. He could have been traded to a contender like the Hurricanes, the Islanders, or right now the Penguins, because they're doing really well. And then another one, which we found really interesting, what actually ended up happening with Colton Parayko, as I said earlier in my last episode. He was supposed to be traded to the Buffalo Sabres, but then he backed out of that deal. And from what I've seen on Instagram, is that Doug Armstrong, he had some passionate words when he was talking to Parayko's agent, which that is crazy, if I might add. And then another person who I think that should have been traded was Elias Pettersson. Now, Pettersson, he's on the worst team right now, the Vancouver. Now, they just won their game against Nashville. As I'm recording this, it is Friday the 13th. They just won yesterday on March the 12th. And he's a guy that he should have been traded at the deadline. Now, the main thing is that I think the reason why he did not get traded to the deadline is that he has a big contract. Unlike the other players that got traded, the only other player that also had a big contract was Nazem Kadri. But Colorado was able to convince Conroy, or the Flames to be exact, to retain 20% of that contract of his. Now, if Vancouver ended up trading Elias Pettersson, they could have retained, say, 30 to 40% of his money, which that's still, you still have a fair amount of cap space. I was checking Puckpedia earlier, and I noticed that Vancouver, they actually have a pretty good amount of cap space. From what I remember, the money that they have over here is, yeah, they only have $2.8 million. And their projection, well, right now they have 14 million, and their projected cap space is 2 million, which that's still good for like a team that's trying to rebuild now since this season has gone haywire for them. The only issue I really have is that also I saw that Jake DeBrusk, his name was also a part of that list as the players to get traded. But that contract he signed, that 7-year contract that he signed 2 years ago, that's a massive contract. He has a no movement clause, and he's gonna be what, like 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 once that contract comes to an end. But then we have the likes of Evander Kane. Now Kane, he's coming off a season with the Oilers in which he didn't do that good with the Oilers, well, until the Stanley Cup final, in which he kind of showed up. But that he got traded to Vancouver. And then another guy that I think that should have been traded was Philip Hronek. Now, Hronek, he is 28 years old, yes, but he's more of a guy that he should have been traded to a contender to the likes of the Colorado Avalanche. Him and Cale Makar they would just be unstoppable. And then, but that's it for Vancouver. But I'm more excited about Calgary because, well, Calgary, right now we have $52 million in current cap space, but our projected cap space is going to be $9 million, which for another team that's trying to get Gavin McKenna. Oh, and by the way, these two teams, they're trying to get Gavin McKenna. The Flames, they decided to, you know what? We are going to try to sell most of our guys. They already did it earlier with Anderson and Uyghur, but during this trade deadline, they didn't get rid of Blake Coleman or Ryan Lomberg, which they should have gotten rid of Coleman, for me, in my opinion. But the fact that they were able to get Victor Olofsson, a prospect, and 2 picks for Nazem Kadri, who, mind you, he is 35 years old, and he has a massive 7-year contract that he signed back in 2022. That's a big deal for the Flames. So now the Flames, they've kind of realized that, hey, how about we just go into the whole rebuilding year, in which I'm happy about because a lot of Flames fans, including myself, we've been tired of being mediocrity. Under Brad Treliving, well, when he first started Brad Treliving, it looked like he was trying to build some stability on the AHL side of it. Maybe some NHL signings then and there. But I remember that first year with Treliving, he actually did really good. But then after that, he just went for the mediocre pickups, which is like they weren't bad, but they weren't good at all. Of course, we had that magical run in 2018 and 19, which we were the number 1 team in the Western Conference. And who did we get? We got Oscar Fantenberg for like a pick. Fantenberg left the Flames later on that year. And then we had another run, which we made it past the first round against Dallas. But then later on, we lost Gaudreau, we lost Tkachuk. And then we did get Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar and Cole Schmidt for that, and a first-round pick. But looking at that trade again, Jonathan Huberdeau, he's not been doing good. Weegar, okay, he actually did really good. And Cole Schmidt, he did play, but he didn't play for that much for Calgary. I believe that he actually got sent on waivers and was claimed by Vegas at that time. But that's for another story. And that is all I have for right now for the NHL trade deadline. On to the World Baseball Classic. Yesterday, we had the likes of Mexico going up against Italy in which Italy smoked Mexico 6-0. I was looking at the roster, and the majority of Italians were Americans. Sure, there were some Italians then in there, but there were a lot of Americans on the Italian group. Today, or tomorrow to be exact, we have Team Canada going up against Team USA in the quarterfinals. I'm just hoping that Canada can get revenge on the hockey teams because, well, if you missed it, the USA men and women, they beat Canada in the gold medal games. But I'm hoping that Canada can win. My prediction is Canada will win 5-4 in the quarterfinals. Will they make it to the championship game? No. But they'll make it close to the championship game. And that, in my books, is a win. And thank you very much for listening to the interesting world of sports. Next week, I'm going to talk about a little bit more about the World Baseball Classic and how the Paralympics went. Yeah, Team Canada, they already got some medals already, I believe 11. So that's for next week, and peace out.